Before the beginning of time, you were. And after the end of time, you will be. For you are eternal. And time is temporary. Time is a function of the physical world and is not part of spirit, for spirit is eternal. There are many topics of discussion that revolve around the issue of time. Whether a soul is more progressed, or a person is an old soul or a new soul. Whether one lives multiple lifetimes or just one. Whether one lives multiple lifetimes sequentially or simultaneously in various dimensions. There are many aspects of time, but consider all of them with the backdrop that it is relegated and a function of the physical world. Time is relative because it is temporary. The questions that revolve around time often obscure the deeper issues. Those questions of whether we live multiple lifetimes, or is time speeding up, or are we moving to a different dimension, often obscure what is now and in the present moment. If you were to look at time through the spiritual connection, you would find that now, this fleeting, seemingly fleeting moment of now, is the closest you come to eternity. The future is malleable. There is a pattern for the future. Yet within that pattern are many avenues for people to take, and therefore it is malleable.
Free will.
Free will.
Mm-hmm.
The general direction and flow, let's say, of the river is set. Yet one can be in the center of this flowing river. One can be settled towards the bottom or on the sides in an eddy. There are many avenues in this river. Yet eventually one follows the flow of the river. So these great debates of time, incarnations, I'm an old soul, you're a new soul, those judgments are of the physical. If you carefully study the words of the world teachers, the spiritual teachers, you will find they did not add any words of judgment. Their growth that they spoke about is of the personality. How well spirit is made manifest by personality.
I appreciate your reminding us that this is the most important time, for one thing, the future is uncertain, and none of us knows for sure that we will have a future. And the reason I say that is this week I experienced the passing of a friend and colleague, only 31 years old. We don't really know the circumstances. It was unexpected. And it has been very, very difficult for those who cared about him to understand what could have happened, and to begin to question what does happen after the body dies. And so I wondered if you would speak to that for a moment.
When there's a passing that is sudden or unexpected, it is difficult for all involved. Those who remain in physical miss that person and feel the effects of loss, as you said, the grieving, the wondering what was left unsaid, or what was said that would have been preferred to be taken back.
Yes.
Similarly, that individual, as they realize that they are no longer in the tangible physical body, they too may wonder these things. They feel that grief, and depending on the circumstances, why did that happen? Why did they allow that to happen? And understand that they are not alone when they wonder these things. There are those whose special mission is to help those who cross over under any circumstance. Let me digress here a little bit. When you pass the physical, the tangible physical body, there is still the emotional and mental bodies, which have a physical element to them, which is why one may see or be able to communicate with a deceased loved one.
Or sense their presence.
Sense their presence. Some even feel a hand on their shoulder. It is because they still have the emotional and mental bodies. They are less dense, but they are still physical nonetheless. And over time, the emotional body is released. And then there is simply the mental body. And then that eventually is released. All the while, it takes what it has learned and brings those things that are most important to what is called the seed atom. And when that individual incarnates, the individualized spirit incarnates again, that seed atom is awakened and blossomed, and you see this personality in many of its forms. So during this time of the emotional and mental body still living, it is reviewing what has happened. And there are groups that are there to help that individual. sometimes, especially in situations where it is an elderly person and they know and have been preparing for this time, they may become more and more aware of those that have passed before and spend more time with them and have a challenge discerning one side or the other. If it were a suicide, there are those that come immediately and help that individual.
We're talking about spiritual beings come and help.
Because that individual was experiencing deep pain. We can liken it to emergency room, and they help that individual up and begin to understand what was happening. And sometimes they need to go back to earlier times in the lifetime to gain the strength to be able to face what was happening at that time of decision. Sometimes it is accident, whether by their own means, let's say drugs, chemical interactions, a careless accident, let's say on the road. There are associated feelings of guilt there also, and remorse. Now, it is not the spirit, understand, but that part of the personality that lives on. And therefore, they too have those who come to them and help them through this process. This pain and judgment is of the physical. And when one crosses over, this is an opportune time for one in spirit to come and say, look, you are separate from that physical body, and you still are. You still exist. Right there is you could say, life-changing awareness.
That's true. Many of us identify who we are with this body that we move around in.
Yes. So right there is a big change for people. And it opens up an awareness. Not everyone opens up immediately, but especially those who question or were seeking help in some way are more apt to accept that comfort.
Mm-hmm.
There are those who so firmly believe in a heaven and a hell that this spiritual awareness of just love, non-judgment, is not what they want to accept.
Mm-hmm.
So it may take a little bit more time for them, depending on how entrenched they were in the belief that it must be that way. But know this, every single individual that goes through this process under any circumstance is helped on the other side. The circumstances under which one may cross over have an effect on that emotional and mental body. And sometimes that is held within the seed atom to be worked out in another lifetime. We try to mitigate this at the beginning, as soon as that person crosses over. So it does not need to be such an impediment in future lifetimes. How can you help when you are still in physical? You can help that individual. Prayers, sending them love and light, sending them awareness that they do live on and that they are loved and even missed, but will be together again, for you will be. This lightening of the grief and the holding of another individual allows that person to see more clearly and generously their life and their separation from that physical experience.
We've had in the past years, I think, more and more insights from people who've had near-death experiences and have come back to talk about what they've glimpsed. Would you say that this is perhaps one of the more typical experiences that they would have had? And is there an intention in the larger plan that some will go and be able to come back with that message of hope for people?
This brings up a topic, perhaps for another time, about the timeliness of one's passing. But if we skirt past that and look at near-death experiences, the answer is yes. That individual is given a choice every time. Even if some say they were told they have to go back, they were told by their spirit self, not by anyone else. And this choice brings them to a new level of awareness that they can not unsee.
Yes.
They may try to disconnect from it or explain it away or hide it because it was not as well accepted in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it unusual that there's so much more conversation about it?
Yes.
Once there is that opening, then others are able to say, something like that happened to me too.
And once again, it creates the opportunity for spirit to enter personality and for us to understand that we are spiritual beings having a physical existence. And through the experience of those who've been at death's door and come back, when there are enough, and some of them have credibility of being surgeons or physicians themselves, that it begins to give to a society that relies on empirical evidence something more tangible to support the potential that life goes on beyond the death of the body. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Near-death experiences bring a lot of questions, especially questions that are not answered in traditional religions. They may actually be answered in the traditional religion, but not in what is publicly expounded.
Mm-hmm.
Near-death experiences bring up these many questions.
Excuse me.
Again, do we have multiple lifetimes? Some say, do we have to go through this again, and why? But know that you are an eternal being, and time is simply a function of the physical. So, the idea of one lifetime or many becomes irrelevant at some point. And the moment of now is the closest to eternity if you are truly experiencing now. Think of a child who does not have all of the stresses that many adults have. They experience things in a timelessness. Perhaps you can remember things from your childhood, especially if it were really joyful memories, and recognizing that perhaps summer vacations lasted a lot longer than summers do today. It is not so much the function of time, but of being in that moment throughout the time.
I can see that. We're distracted so much.
And worried. To bring oneself to be guided by Spirit. That is a worthwhile topic also.
Yes.
I thank you very much for this opportunity and platform. We bless you. We bid you Godspeed.
Thank you. And we look forward to hearing more on these various topics. Thank you so much.